The information in this video comes from thorough research. Please share your thoughts on the video Mahatma Gandhi, the life and legacy of a global icon, in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think. Be the change that you wish to see in the world. Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi, the life and legacy of a global icon. The making of the Mahatma. Few individuals have shaped the moral and political landscape of the modern world as profoundly as Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Known universally as Mahatma, meaning great soul, Gandhi transformed the idea of resistance. In an era when empires were maintained by violence, he proved that truth and nonviolence could be revolutionary weapons. His life, marked by humility, sacrifice, and unyielding moral conviction, became a blueprint for movements far beyond India. From Martin Luther King Jr.'s struggle for civil rights in the United States to Nelson Mandela's fight against apartheid in South Africa. But Gandhi did not begin life as a saint or a leader. His journey from a timid, uncertain boy in a small Indian state to a moral giant on the world stage is a story of remarkable evolution, driven by introspection, courage, and an unwavering pursuit of truth. Early life, 1869 to 1888. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born on October 2, 1869, in the coastal town of Porbandar, in present-day Gujarat, India. His family belonged to the Madhbaniya caste, traditionally merchants and administrators. His father, Karamchand Gandhi, served as the Diwan, chief minister, of the small princely state, while his mother, Putlabai, was deeply religious, following strict fasting rituals and prayer. From his mother, Gandhi inherited a spirit of devotion and self-discipline. From his father, he absorbed the values of honesty and service. The home environment combined worldly responsibility with spiritual piety, a duality that would define Gandhi's later philosophy of Sarvodaya, welfare for all. As a boy, Gandhi was shy and withdrawn. He preferred solitude to games, and though he was an average student, he had a curious mind and strong moral sensitivity. He later recalled how a schoolboy's lie, told to cover up his brother's mistake, tormented him for days until he confessed. That early experience left a lasting impression. Truth, he realized, was not merely a virtue, but a living force within the conscience. When Gandhi was only 13, he was married to Kasturba Mukherjee, a girl of the same age, in keeping with local custom. The child marriage was typical of the time, but it later became a source of self-reflection and guilt for Gandhi, who would later condemn the practice. Their relationship evolved over decades, from youthful friction to profound spiritual partnership. At 16, Gandhi's father died, a blow that shook him deeply. Around the same time, he lost his first child, an infant born prematurely. Grief and guilt drove him inward, but also awakened in him a new seriousness about life and duty, education, and formative influences. In 1888, at the age of 19, Gandhi traveled to London to study law at the Inner Temple, one of the city's four Inns of Court. The decision was met with resistance from his conservative community, who feared he would lose caste by crossing the sea. Gandhi, however, promised his mother that he would abstain from meat, alcohol, and women, a vow he honored faithfully. London was a revelation. For the first time, Gandhi encountered Western civilization in its full form, industrial, scientific, and cosmopolitan. He struggled at first to adapt. His English clothes felt uncomfortable, his shyness made him lonely, and his dietary restrictions complicated social life. But gradually, curiosity replaced fear. He joined a vegetarian society, read extensively on diet, religion, and ethics, and began experimenting with self-discipline. It was in London that Gandhi first read the Bhagavad Gita, a text that would become his lifelong spiritual guide. The Gita's message of selfless action, nishkama karma, resonated deeply with him. He also read the Bible, particularly the Sermon on the Mount, which emphasized love for one's enemies and turning the other cheek. The parallel between Christ's teaching and the Gita's call for inner peace fascinated him. The Gita and the Sermon on the Mount, he would later say, left an indelible mark on my soul. By the time he completed his studies in 1891 and returned to India, Gandhi was intellectually enriched but uncertain about his future. His first attempts to practice law in Bombay failed. His shyness in court prevented him from speaking. Fate, however, soon intervened in the form of a job offer that would change the course of his life. South Africa, 1893 to 1914, The Awakening. In 1893, Gandhi accepted a one-year contract from an Indian firm, Deda Abdullah and Amp Company, to work as a legal representative in Natal, South Africa. He was 23. What began as a routine legal engagement turned into a 20-year sojourn that transformed him from a timid lawyer into a fearless social reformer. Within days of arriving, Gandhi encountered the harsh reality of racial discrimination. While traveling to Pretoria on business, he was thrown out of a first-class train compartment at Pietermaritzburg station despite having a valid ticket, simply because of his skin color. That night, shivering on the platform, he made a decision that would define his life. He would not submit to injustice, nor would he respond with hatred. He would fight peacefully but firmly. This was the birth of Gandhi's moral rebellion. Over the next 2 decades, Gandhi became the voice of the Indian community in South Africa, who faced humiliating restrictions, denial of voting rights, forced registration, and segregation. He founded the Natal Indian Congress, NIC, in 1894, organizing Indians across class and religious lines. His campaigns combined legal argument with moral appeal, exposing the hypocrisy of the British Empire's civilizing mission. Gandhi's activism intensified in 1906, when the Transvaal government passed the Asiatic Registration Act, requiring all Indians to carry identification passes and submit to fingerprinting. At a mass meeting in Johannesburg, Gandhi proposed a radical response: Satyagraha, truth force or soul force. It was a new form of resistance, rooted not in violence, but in moral courage and voluntary suffering. He urged Indians to defy the unjust law peacefully and accept imprisonment rather than compliance. Thousands joined him. They burned their registration certificates, courted arrest, and endured beatings without retaliation. The campaign drew global attention. Even those who disagreed with Gandhi's methods admired his followers' discipline. For Gandhi, Satyagraha was not merely a political tactic, it was a way of life, combining truth, satya, and love, ahimsa. During his years in South Africa, Gandhi also underwent a personal transformation. He simplified his lifestyle, adopted simple clothing made of hand-spun cloth, and founded Tolstoy Farm, a communal settlement based on equality and manual labor. He was deeply influenced by Leo Tolstoy's philosophy of non-resistance and by John Ruskin's Under This Last, which taught the dignity of labor and social equality. By the time Gandhi returned to India in 1915, he was no longer the hesitant barrister who had left 22 years earlier. He had become a leader forged by suffering, a man who believed that true power lies not in arms or wealth, but in moral integrity. Gandhi's return to India and rise as a national leader, 1915 to 1920. A hero returns. When Mahatma Gandhi returned to India in January 1915, he was greeted not with the fanfare of a conqueror, but with the curiosity of a nation still unsure of his significance. He had spent over 2 decades in South Africa, and while his campaigns there had attracted admiration from a small circle of Indian intellectuals, the general public knew little about him. India in 1915 was a land simmering with discontent, but lacking a unified moral voice. The Indian National Congress, Inc., formed in 1885, was still a platform dominated by lawyers, intellectuals, and moderate reformers. Its debates were polite, its resolutions cautious, and its goals limited to petitions for administrative reforms within the British Empire. The masses, the farmers, workers, and villagers, remained untouched by the idea of political awakening. Gandhi's return would change that forever. He was warmly welcomed by Gopal Krishna Gokhale, a senior leader of the Congress and a man Gandhi revered as his political mentor. Gokhale advised him to travel across the country before taking any active political role. "See India," Gokhale told him, "not from the windows of the elite, but from the hearts of her people." Gandhi took this advice to heart. The Pilgrim of India. For the next year, Gandhi undertook a journey through the length and breadth of India. He visited villages, ashrams, and temples, observing the conditions of ordinary people. What he saw filled him with both sorrow and resolve. The country was steeped in poverty, disease, and superstition. Farmers were crushed by taxes. Artisans were displaced by imported British goods. Untouchability divided Hindu society, and illiteracy darkened millions of minds. Yet beneath this suffering, Gandhi sensed a deep spiritual vitality, a moral strength waiting to be awakened. India is not impoverished for want of material wealth, he wrote, but for want of moral vision. He realized that India's freedom would not come merely through political agitation, but through moral and social regeneration. The fight for independence, to him, was as much a struggle of the soul as of politics. During this period, Gandhi also founded the Sabarmati Ashram near Ahmedabad in Gujarat. It was both a spiritual retreat and a laboratory for his ideals of truth, nonviolence, and self-sufficiency. The ashram residents, men, women, and children from all backgrounds, lived simply, wore hand-spun cloth khadi, and worked with their hands. It was here that Gandhi began spinning yarn daily, transforming it into a symbol of self-reliance and resistance against British industrial domination. The Champaran Experiment, 1917. Gandhi's first major test as a leader in India came in Champaran, a district in the state of Bihar. In 1917, he received a request from local peasants to help them resist the abuses of British indigo planters. The farmers were forced by colonial law to grow indigo on a portion of their land, often at ruinous prices. When the global market for indigo collapsed, the planters continued to exploit them through debt and intimidation. Gandhi traveled to Champaran to investigate, and the local authorities immediately ordered him to leave. Gandhi refused. Calmly, he declared that obedience to conscience was higher than obedience to unjust law. He stayed, gathered testimonies, and mobilized the peasants through peaceful protest. The British administration, initially dismissive, grew alarmed at his growing influence. They charged him with civil disobedience, but Gandhi welcomed the trial. In court, he stated firmly, "I am here to serve the cause of justice. I cannot obey a law that insults the dignity of man." The magistrate, taken aback by his sincerity, suspended the trial. Eventually, the government appointed a commission to investigate, which confirmed Gandhi's findings and forced reforms in favor of the peasants. The Champaran Satyagraha was Gandhi's first victory in India. It revealed the power of nonviolent protest and introduced a new kind of leader, one who fought with love rather than hatred. The peasants of Champaran began to call him Bapu, Father, a title that would follow him to the end of his life. The Quetta and Ahmedabad struggles, 1918. Fresh from his success in Champaran, Gandhi turned his attention to other injustices. In Quetta district of Gujarat, farmers were unable to pay land taxes after a devastating crop failure. The British government refused to grant relief. Gandhi urged the peasants to withhold taxes until their grievances were heard, but to do so peacefully and without violence. The farmers stood firm, facing confiscation of property and arrest. After months of stalemate, the authorities finally relented, suspending the tax and returning seized lands. It was another triumph of moral courage over coercive power. Around the same time, a labor dispute erupted in Ahmedabad between mill workers and factory owners over wage reductions. Gandhi mediated between the two sides, encouraging workers to remain peaceful but united. When negotiations broke down, he launched a fast unto death, not to punish the owners, but to awaken their conscience. The strike ended with an agreement favorable to the workers. Gandhi's use of fasting as a moral instrument, aimed at self-purification rather than coercion, became one of his most distinctive methods of persuasion. These early movements established Gandhi as a leader of the people, not merely of the educated elite. They also demonstrated his unique approach to politics, combining spiritual discipline with practical action. He believed that the pursuit of truth, satya, and nonviolence, ahimsa, was not limited to religion. It was the foundation of all human relations, from reform to revolution, the Rowlatt Act and the awakening of India. By 1919, Gandhi had become a figure of national prominence. The First World War had ended, but instead of rewarding India's loyalty, the British imposed new repressive measures. The Rowlatt Act, passed in March 1919, authorized the government to imprison anyone suspected of sedition without trial. To Gandhi, this was a betrayal of justice and liberty. He called for a nationwide protest, a Satyagraha of truth and nonviolence. On April 6, 1919, millions of Indians observed a Hartal general strike. Shops closed, prayers were held, and people demonstrated peacefully. But in some places, violence erupted, and British troops responded with brutality. The worst atrocity occurred in Amritsar, Punjab, on April 13, 1919. A peaceful crowd had gathered in the Jallianwala Bagh, a walled garden, to protest the arrest of local leaders. Without warning, General Reginald Dyer ordered his soldiers to open fire on the unarmed crowd. Hundreds were killed, thousands wounded. The massacre shocked the world and radicalized Indian opinion against British rule. Gandhi was heartbroken. Though he had called for peaceful protest, he felt responsible for the violence that had erupted in some areas. In deep remorse, he suspended the movement, insisting that India was not yet spiritually prepared for true nonviolent struggle. Freedom, he said, cannot be built on anger. It must be built on the discipline of love. Yet the moral tide had turned. The Jallianwala Bagh massacre shattered faith in British justice. Gandhi's leadership, rooted in conscience rather than revenge, offered a new path. India began to look to him not merely as a political reformer, but as the conscience of the nation. Non-cooperation begins 1920. The post-war period brought a new wave of discontent. The British had promised self-government, but delivered instead repressive laws and continued economic exploitation. Meanwhile, the Khilafat movement, launched by Indian Muslims to protest the dismemberment of the Ottoman Caliphate, sought Gandhi's support. Gandhi saw in the Khilafat cause an opportunity to unite Hindus and Muslims in a common struggle against imperialism. In September 1920, he convinced the Congress to adopt a bold program of non-cooperation with British rule. He urged Indians to boycott British schools, courts, offices, and goods. We must withdraw our cooperation from evil, he said, and purify ourselves through sacrifice. Millions responded. Students left government schools. Lawyers gave up their practices. Workers went on strike. Women joined the movement with new courage. The spinning wheel, charkha, became the symbol of resistance. Every thread a quiet act of defiance against British industry. For the first time, India's independence movement became a mass movement. Gandhi had transformed politics into a moral crusade, but he remained cautious. He warned his followers constantly against hatred and violence. Nonviolence, he said, is not the weapon of the weak, but of the strong. For him, self-restraint was the highest form of strength. His emphasis on purity of means over mere success set him apart from all other revolutionaries. A new kind of leader. By the early 1920s, Gandhi had become not only the leader of the Indian National Congress, but the moral center of the freedom struggle. He was revered by millions as Mahatma, the great soul. Yet he remained humble, dressing in the simplest homespun cloth, living in ashrams, spinning his own yarn, and insisting on equality between all castes and religions. He redefined politics as a form of moral service. The best way to find yourself, he told his followers, is to lose yourself in the service of others. For Gandhi, freedom was not merely political independence, but freedom from fear, greed, and injustice. He believed that only through self-purification could India earn the right to be free. The non-cooperation movement would soon lead to new challenges and sacrifices, but by 1920, Gandhi had achieved something unprecedented. He had awakened a sleeping nation and given it a soul. The Great Campaigns, 1921 to 1942 nonviolence becomes a revolution. The non-cooperation movement, 1920 to 1922, By early 1921, Gandhi's call for non-cooperation had spread like wildfire. Villagers who had never heard of politics now knew his name. Women who had lived behind veils marched in protest. Even school children chanted Swaraj, self-rule. It was no longer a movement of elites. It was a mass awakening. Gandhi's plan was clear: withdraw the moral and economic support that sustained British rule. Indians were urged to boycott government jobs, schools, courts, British clothes, and foreign goods. They were to spin their own yarn, support Indian industries, and build a self-reliant nation. The moment we refuse to cooperate, Gandhi declared, the empire will crumble of itself. The movement's moral discipline impressed the world. Everywhere, people marched peacefully, holding aloft the tricolor flag of independence. Yet the British authorities responded with repression, arrests, lathi charges, and censorship. Jails overflowed with volunteers. Gandhi himself was arrested in 1922 and charged with sedition. In court, he delivered one of his most famous statements: affection cannot be manufactured or regulated by law. If one has no affection for a system of government, he should be free to express his disaffection. I consider it a sin to have affection for the British Empire. He was sentenced to 6 years' imprisonment, but the imprisonment of Gandhi only made him greater in the eyes of the people. The Mahatma may be in prison, one newspaper wrote, but his spirit walks free across India. A pause and reflection. After his release from prison in 1924, due to poor health, Gandhi found the movement scattered. Violence had erupted at Chayuri Chowra, where a mob burned a police station, killing 22 officers. Deeply shocked, Gandhi had suspended the campaign earlier, saying that India was not yet ready for true nonviolence. His critics accused him of weakness, but Gandhi remained firm. If India takes up the sword, she will perish by the sword. During this pause, Gandhi focused on social reform. He launched campaigns against untouchability, urging Hindus to treat all castes as equals. He called the so-called untouchables Harijans, meaning children of God. He also promoted the spinning wheel as the symbol of national unity and self-help. For him, weaving cloth was both an economic act and a moral one. It replaced dependency with dignity. Return to politics and the Salt March, 1930. By the late 1920s, India's patience was wearing thin. The British had refused to grant dominion status, and frustration grew. The Congress, now firmly under Gandhi's moral influence, decided to demand Purna Swaraj, complete independence. To dramatize this demand, Gandhi planned a campaign that would strike at the heart of British economic control: the salt tax. Salt was a necessity for every Indian, yet its production was a government monopoly. Gandhi saw in it a perfect symbol of oppression: simple, universal, and unjust. On March 12, 1930, Gandhi, then 60 years old, began the Salt March from his Sabarmati ashram with 78 followers. They walked 240 miles to the coastal village of Dandi, stopping at villages along the way to preach nonviolence and unity. As they marched, thousands joined. By the time they reached the sea on April 6th, the procession had become a national pilgrimage. There, before a vast crowd, Gandhi bent down, scooped up a handful of salty mud, and declared, "With this salt, I shake the foundations of the British Empire." That simple act electrified India and the world. Across the country, people began making their own salt, defying the law. The British responded with arrests and brutality, but the moral victory was already won. Newspapers across Europe and America praised the courage of India's peaceful revolutionaries. Gandhi was again imprisoned, but his image, calm, barefoot, and resolute, became immortal. The civil disobedience movement, 1930 to 1934. The Salt March ignited the civil disobedience movement, a vast campaign of boycotts, strikes, and non-payment of taxes. The British cracked down with force, arresting more than 60,000 people, including most of the Congress leaders. But the spirit of defiance would not die. From his cell in Yerwada prison, Gandhi fasted and prayed. His health deteriorated, but his resolve grew stronger. The government, under pressure from world opinion, invited him to the Round Table Conference in London, 1931, to discuss constitutional reforms. Gandhi attended as the sole representative of the Indian National Congress. In London, dressed in his simple loincloth and shawl, he met kings, ministers, and industrialists. Though many regarded his simplicity with amusement, others were struck by his quiet dignity. "You are the only real prince here," one observer told him. The conference itself ended in disappointment. No meaningful concessions were offered, but Gandhi had succeeded in making India's cause a matter of global conscience. Returning to India, he found repression worse than before. The civil disobedience movement continued sporadically, but by 1934 Gandhi suspended it, believing the nation needed a period of constructive work. He turned once more to social reforms, education, rural development, and the uplift of the Harijans. For him, true Swaraj meant not just political freedom, but freedom from poverty, ignorance, and discrimination. The years of preparation, 1935 to 1939. During the mid-1930s, Gandhi's influence remained immense, though he held no official position in the Congress. He encouraged younger leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, preparing them for the responsibilities of leadership. Nehru, a modern socialist, sometimes clashed with Gandhi's spiritual idealism, but their bond of respect endured. Gandhi also deepened his philosophy of Sarvodaya, the welfare of all. He envisioned a decentralized India of self-sufficient villages, where cooperation replaced competition and truth-guided politics. "My notion of democracy," he said, "is that under it the weakest shall have the same opportunities as the strongest." The Government of India Act, 1935, granted limited provincial autonomy, and elections brought Congress ministries to power in several regions. Gandhi stayed in the background, guiding the movement's moral compass rather than its political machinery. The Second World War and the Moral Crisis, 1939 to 1942. When World War II broke out in 1939, the British government declared India a participant without consulting any Indian leader. The Congress protested, demanding a statement of post-war independence. Gandhi was torn. His nonviolence made it impossible for him to support war, yet he opposed the tyranny of Nazism. He wrote to the British Viceroy, urging him to fight Hitler with moral strength rather than arms, a plea that went unheeded. As the war dragged on, frustration grew. The British refused to promise freedom even after the war. Gandhi, once again the voice of the people's conscience, declared, "We cannot fight for other people's liberty while we are denied our own." The Quit India Movement, 1942. By 1942, Gandhi's patience had reached its limit. At the All India Congress Committee session in Bombay on August 8, 1942, he issued his most powerful call yet, "Quit India," a demand for immediate British withdrawal. He urged Indians to do or die in the cause of freedom, but to remain nonviolent whatever the provocation. The response was explosive. Demonstrations erupted across the country. Students, workers, and farmers joined in mass protests. The British retaliated with overwhelming force, arresting all major Congress leaders within hours, including Gandhi, Nehru, and Patel. Gandhi was imprisoned at the Aga Khan Palace in Pune, where he would endure personal tragedy, the death of his beloved wife Kasturba in 1944. In prison, Gandhi's health declined sharply. He fasted repeatedly, demanding an end to violence and repression. His fasts, intended for self-purification, became global events. Even his British jailers came to admire his serenity. "The man of peace," one said, "has conquered us without striking a blow." Though the Quit India movement was suppressed, it marked the final moral turning point. The British had lost the moral right to rule. Even Churchill's government understood that India could not be held by force forever. The philosopher of nonviolence. Throughout these years of struggle, Gandhi's philosophy matured into a complete vision of human ethics. Nonviolence, he taught, was not merely a political tactic, but a way of life, a positive force of love that seeks to convert the oppressor rather than destroy him. "Ahimsa," he wrote, "is not the meek submission of the coward, but the might of the soul. He linked this with truth, satya, the ultimate reality to be pursued through humility and self-sacrifice. Together, satya and ahimsa formed the twin pillars of his thought. Every campaign he led was an experiment in truth, a moral laboratory to test the power of the human spirit. Gandhi's example inspired not only Indians, but people across the world. Leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and Cesar Chavez would later draw upon his principles in their own struggles for justice. Toward the dawn, by the time Gandhi was released from prison in 1944, India's freedom was only a matter of time. The British Empire, exhausted by war and shaken by moral shame, knew it could no longer suppress the will of 400 million souls united by nonviolence. Gandhi, frail but unbroken, emerged once more as the nation's moral guide. He had walked through decades of struggle, from the dusty fields of Champaran to the prisons of Pune, armed with nothing but faith. The road ahead would bring independence and heartbreak, but the soul of India had been transformed forever. Triumph and tragedy, 1943 to 1948, the last pilgrimage, the final imprisonment and the fading empire. When Gandhi was released from prison in 1944 after 2 years of confinement at the Aga Khan Palace, the world had changed. World War II was nearing its end. The British Empire was weakened, and global opinion increasingly favored self-determination. Gandhi emerged to find India restless, politically divided, and deeply wounded by communal suspicion between Hindus and Muslims. The Muslim League, under Muhammad Ali Jinnah, now demanded a separate nation, Pakistan, arguing that Muslims could not coexist safely in a Hindu-majority India. Gandhi was deeply pained by this development. To him, Hindus and Muslims were not two nations but two threads in the same fabric. He wrote sorrowfully, "My whole soul rebels against the idea that Hindu and Muslim are different races or religions destined to be enemies." Despite failing health, Gandhi resumed his tireless work for unity. He met repeatedly with Jinnah, pleading for reconciliation. He offered remarkable compromises, even suggesting that the League could form the first independent government of India if that would preserve unity. But mistrust ran too deep. His moral appeals could not overcome the tide of political fear and ambition. The road to independence, 1945 to 1947. In 1945, Britain's Labour government came to power, more sympathetic to Indian aspirations. The new Viceroy, Lord Wavell, and later Lord Mountbatten, recognized that British rule was no longer sustainable. Negotiations began for India's transfer of power. The Indian National Congress, led by Jawaharlal Nehru, and the Muslim League, led by Jinnah, took center stage in constitutional talks. Gandhi, though still revered as the moral leader of the nation, found himself increasingly sidelined in the practical politics of independence. His idealism often clashed with the pragmatism of the younger leaders. He remained calm, reminding everyone that true freedom meant liberation from hatred, not merely the end of British rule. "We must be free," he said, "not because we hate the English, but because we love freedom." But history was moving fast. The League refused to accept any arrangement short of partition, and communal violence began to erupt in Bengal and Punjab. The British, eager for an orderly exit, accepted the demand for partition. Gandhi fought the decision to the last, warning that India will be cut not on paper, but through our hearts. Yet by mid-1947, it was clear that partition was inevitable. The agony of partition. The announcement of India's independence on August 15, 1947, should have been the crowning moment of Gandhi's life. Instead, it brought him deep sorrow. While Delhi celebrated, Gandhi refused to participate in the official ceremonies. "How can I celebrate," he said, "when Hindus and Muslims are killing each other?" He spent the day in Calcutta, fasting and praying for peace. All around, the subcontinent burned. The division of India and Pakistan unleashed one of the largest and bloodiest migrations in history. Over 10 million people displaced, and more than 1 million killed in riots and massacres. Trains full of refugees arrived at stations carrying only corpses. Villages were burned, women were assaulted, and centuries-old communities vanished overnight. In those dark days, Gandhi became a one-man peace army. He traveled through Bengal, Bihar, and Punjab, areas ravaged by communal hatred, risking his life to stop the violence. His only weapon was his presence and his moral authority. In Calcutta, he fasted unto death until both Hindu and Muslim leaders swore to end the bloodshed. Miraculously, the violence stopped. Even the British press called it the Calcutta Miracle. When asked how he achieved peace without arms, Gandhi replied quietly, "It is not the weapon, but the will that conquers." Gandhi and a new India. Independent India was born, but not the India Gandhi had dreamed of. He had envisioned a decentralized, village-based society guided by truth and self-reliance, not an industrial state modeled on the West. The new government, led by Nehru, pursued rapid modernization and centralization. Gandhi did not oppose it directly, but he knew his path was diverging from the political future of the nation he had freed. Still, he continued to work for the uplift of the poor, the dignity of women, and the eradication of untouchability. He moved to Delhi, living humbly in the Birla House, where he held daily prayer meetings. Even as age and frailty overtook him, he remained the moral compass of India, its living conscience. His message of ahimsa and sarvodaya, welfare for all, continued to guide millions. Yet not everyone shared his faith in reconciliation. Among some Hindu extremists, resentment grew. They saw Gandhi's compassion for Muslims as betrayal. Rumors circulated that he was appeasing Pakistan at India's expense. Gandhi dismissed the hate with gentle humor. "If I am to die by an assassin's bullet," he once said, "I must do so smiling, without anger toward my killer." The martyrdom of the Mahatma. On January 30th, 1948, at 5:17 p.m., Gandhi walked slowly to his evening prayer meeting in the gardens of Birla House. He was weak from fasting, supported by his grandnieces. As he greeted the crowd with his customary namaste, a man stepped forward, Nathram Godse, a Hindu extremist. Godse bowed before Gandhi, then fired 3 bullets at point-blank range. Gandhi fell, murmuring, "Hey Ram, oh God!" He died instantly. The news spread across the world like a shockwave. Pandit Nehru, his disciple and India's first prime minister, addressed the nation in tears. "The light has gone out of our lives, and there is darkness everywhere. I do not know what to tell you. The light that shone in this country was no ordinary light. The light will illumine this country for many years to come." Millions wept openly. In India's cities and villages, people mourned not just a leader, but father. The man who had led them to freedom had been felled by hatred, the very evil he had spent his life fighting. Gandhi's body was taken on a gun carriage through the streets of Delhi, followed by millions in silent grief. His ashes were later immersed in the Ganges River, symbolically returning him to the land and people he loved. The eternal legacy. Gandhi's death did not end his influence. In truth, it marked the beginning of his immortality. His principles, truth, nonviolence, self-discipline, and compassion, became universal ideals that transcended nations and religions. In the years that followed, Gandhi's example inspired movements for justice across the world. Martin Luther King Jr. adopted his philosophy of nonviolent resistance during the American Civil Rights Movement. Nelson Mandela invoked Gandhi's spirit during South Africa's struggle against apartheid. Even global leaders far removed from his faith or politics acknowledged his moral greatness. Albert Einstein famously said, "Generations to come will scarcely believe that such a one as this ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth." In India, Gandhi remains not just a historical figure, but a moral presence. His face adorns every currency note, yet his true wealth lies in his ideas. His vision of an India rooted in simplicity, equality, and spiritual strength continues to challenge and inspire. His concept of Satyagraha, resistance through truth, has influenced peace movements, environmental activism, and social reform around the world. The meaning of his message. At its heart, Gandhi's message was disarmingly simple. Be truthful, love your enemy, and serve others selflessly. But the simplicity hides immense strength. He believed that every human being possesses an inner power, the soul force that, when guided by truth, can transform society. My life, he once said, is my message. He taught that freedom without morality is chaos, and politics without ethics is violence. He rejected the idea that ends justify means. For Gandhi, pure ends required pure means. This principle distinguished him from every revolutionary before or after him. He also redefined courage. In a world that equated strength with aggression, Gandhi proved that restraint could be stronger than rage. Nonviolence, he said, is the weapon of the strong, not the weak. His philosophy was not abstract. It was lived daily, in his diet, his dress, his speech, his silence. He called his experiments experiments with truth because he never claimed perfection. He only sought to grow closer to truth through each action. Gandhi's global relevance today. More than 75 years after his death, Gandhi's ideas remain astonishingly relevant. In an age marked by polarization, consumerism, and environmental crisis, his emphasis on simplicity and compassion offers an alternative vision of progress. His principle of ahimsa calls for dialogue over domination, and his belief in self-reliance encourages sustainable living. From community movements to climate activism, Gandhi's thought continues to inspire those who believe in peaceful change. His spinning wheel has become a symbol of sustainable industry. His Salt March has become a metaphor for civil disobedience everywhere, from Prague to Cape Town to Washington, D.C. Even technology-driven generations find resonance in his warning. The earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. The light that never dims. Mahatma Gandhi's life was a continuous search for truth, for justice, for the divine in the human. He began as a shy lawyer and ended as the moral conscience of humanity. His journey, from Porbandar to Pietermaritzburg, from Dandi to Delhi, was not only India's struggle for freedom, but also humanity's experiment with conscience. He left behind no wealth, no throne, no army, only a legacy of truth and nonviolence that continues to challenge the world's conscience. His dream was not of a powerful India, but of a good India, not of domination, but of harmony. In the final analysis, Gandhi's greatness lay not in his victories, but in his faith, in love over hate, and in the infinite potential of the human soul. The Mahatma is gone, but his spirit endures wherever people choose peace over war, compassion over cruelty, and truth over fear. The light that he lit in 1869 still burns, undimmed. Triumph and tragedy. 1943 to 1948, the last pilgrimage. The final imprisonment and the fading empire. When Gandhi was released from prison in 1944, the world had changed. World War II was ending, Britain was weakened, and global opinion favored self-determination. Gandhi emerged to find India restless and divided by religious suspicion. The Muslim League under Muhammad Ali Jinnah demanded a separate nation, Pakistan. Gandhi, heartbroken, pleaded for unity. My whole soul rebels against the idea that Hindu and Muslim are destined to be enemies. Despite failing health, he met Jinnah repeatedly, offering even to let the League form India's first government if it would preserve unity. But mistrust ran too deep. The road to independence, 1945 to 1947. Britain's Labour government recognized that empire could not last. Negotiations began among the Congress, the Muslim League, and the British. Gandhi, still the nation's conscience, warned that freedom must mean liberation from hatred as well as for Britain. Violence, however, swept Bengal and Punjab. When the British accepted partition, Gandhi mourned. India will be cut not on paper, but through our hearts. The agony of partition. Independence came on August 15, 1947, but Gandhi refused celebration. How can I rejoice, he asked, when Hindus and Muslims are killing each other? While Delhi celebrated, Gandhi fasted in Calcutta, praying for peace amid massacres that killed over 1 million. His presence alone stopped riots. Hindus and Muslims pledged peace as he lay near death. The world called it the Calcutta Miracle. Gandhi and the New India. The New India, led by Jawaharlal Nehru, pursued modernization. Gandhi envisioned small, self-reliant villages. Still, he worked for equality and reconciliation. Living simply in Delhi's Birla House, he preached forgiveness even as extremists accused him of betrayal. "If I must die by an assassin's bullet," he said, "I must do so smiling." The martyrdom of the Mahatma. On January 30th, 1948, Gandhi walked to his evening prayers. A man stepped forward, Nathragadsa, and fired 3 bullets. Gandhi fell, whispering, "Hey Ram." Pundit Nehru told the nation, "The light has gone out of our lives." The light that shone in this country was no ordinary light. Millions wept. His funeral drew the largest procession in India's history. The eternal legacy. Gandhi's principles, truth, nonviolence, simplicity, became global ideals. Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and many others drew strength from him. Einstein wrote, "Generations to come will scarcely believe that such a one as this ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth." The meaning of his message. Gandhi's creed was simple. Be truthful, love your enemy, serve others selflessly. He proved that moral force could defeat empire, that restraint is courage, and that means and ends must be equally pure. "My life," he said, "is my message." Global relevance today. His warnings ring true in the modern age of greed and violence. The earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. Nonviolence remains a strategy for civil rights, environmental justice, and peace-building worldwide. The light that never dims. Gandhi began as a shy lawyer and ended as the moral conscience of humanity. He left no throne, no riches, only a legacy of truth and love that still challenges the world's conscience. If you have any experiences related to this topic, be sure to share them with us. Until the next episode, be mindful of the energies around you.